The young man entered the small cafe with slow steps, as if each step was heavy for him. His clothes were old, his hair was messy, and his eyes looked tired, like he had not slept peacefully in a long time. People sitting inside the cafe noticed him, but no one really cared. Some looked at him for a second and then returned to their conversations, thinking he was just another person passing by. The cafe was warm, full of noise, laughter, and the smell of fresh coffee. But inside his heart, everything felt cold. He only came for one thing, a single cup of coffee that he could not afford. He stood near the counter, waiting quietly, almost invisible to everyone. The barista, a young girl with a bright smile, asked him what he wanted. But when he spoke, his voice was soft and shaky, like someone who had lost too much in life. He said, "Can I play your piano for a free coffee?" The moment these words came out of his mouth, the cafe fell into a short silence, and then laughter began from one corner. A group of students sitting near the window burst into laughter first. One of them said loudly, "Bro thinks he can get free coffee by playing the piano." Another added, "This should be fun. Maybe he will break the keys." Some customers smiled, some looked confused, and some rolled their eyes. They all thought he was joking, or maybe he wanted attention. The manager of the cafe, a tall man with a strict face, crossed his arms and looked at the young man up and down. He saw the worn shoes, the thin jacket, and the nervous eyes. To him, it looked like someone trying to get a free drink with a silly trick. But the young man did not step back. He kept standing there, quiet and polite. Even when people laughed at him, he knew he looked poor. He knew everyone expected him to do something embarrassing, but he also knew he needed this coffee. It was cold outside, and he had been walking all morning with an empty stomach. The cafe was his only chance to warm up. He also loved music deeply, and playing a piano was something he had not done in years. It felt like a broken part of him could come alive again. The manager finally spoke with a mocking smile. "You want to play the piano for a free coffee?" The young man nodded shyly. "Yes, sir, just once. I promise I won't harm anything. I only want a cup of coffee." The manager laughed and said loudly so everyone could hear, "Fine. Go ahead. Show us how you earn your coffee." The people in the cafe clapped sarcastically, as if they were about to watch a funny performance. Someone even took out their phone and started recording, thinking it would be a great video to post online later for laughs. The young man walked toward the old piano placed in the corner of the cafe. It was dusty and slightly out of tune, but to him it looked like a friend he had lost long ago. He touched the wooden surface gently, as if saying hello after many years. His fingers trembled when he reached for the keys. He could feel all the eyes on him. He could hear the whispers behind him. He knew people expected him to make mistakes. Maybe they thought he would play like a child hitting random keys. But inside his mind, he remembered something different. He remembered his mother's voice telling him that he had a gift. He remembered the music school he once dreamed of. He remembered the nights he played piano until sunrise, when life still felt kind. Those memories warmed him more than the cafe heater. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to gather courage. The students whispered, "He's scared already." Someone giggled, but he didn't care. For the first time in a long time, he felt he was standing exactly where he needed to be. His hands hovered above the piano keys, waiting for the right moment. The cafe was still noisy behind him, but in his heart, everything went quiet. It was just him and the piano now, the one thing that had always understood him. With a slow breath, he prepared to play the first note. All the laughter, all the doubts, all the mocking comments became a distant echo. He was ready to show them something they did not expect, to not because he wanted to prove them wrong, but because music was the only truth he had left. The moment the young man sat at the piano, the cafe continued buzzing with noise. But inside his heart, there was only silence. He kept his fingers above the keys without pressing anything yet. He needed a few seconds to breathe, to control the shaking in his hands. He was not scared of playing. He was scared of failing again in front of people. Life had already crushed his confidence many times. This performance felt like his last chance to remind himself who he used to be. A little boy sitting with his mother stared at the young man with innocent curiosity. "Mom," the child whispered, "do you think he can really play?" The mother smiled awkwardly. "Maybe," she replied softly, though she did not believe it. Even she had silently judged the young man based on his appearance. Everyone in the cafe had assumed the same thing. A poor man asking for free coffee must be talentless, hopeless, and desperate. But no one knew his past. No one knew that when he was younger, he could listen to any song once and play it perfectly. No one knew that he had been accepted into a famous music academy before his life fell apart. His father lost his job, bills piled up, and his mother became sick. He had to give up his dreams to work small jobs and take care of his family. Then, a few years later, his mother passed away. After that, he stopped touching the piano completely. The music inside him went silent, like a bird locked in a cage. Today, fate had dragged him back to the keys as he sat there. He remembered the last words his mother told him. "People may forget your face, but they will never forget how your music makes them feel." Her voice echoed faintly inside him, giving him strength. His breath steadied, his back straightened. His shaking slowly stopped. However, the people behind him did not see this emotional battle. They just saw a quiet man sitting too long without playing. One of the students laughed and said loudly, "Maybe the piano is too complicated for him." His friend snickered. Someone else muttered, "Come on, man, just press something." But there was one person who looked at him differently. The barista? She noticed the way he handled the piano, the gentle care in his fingertips. She saw his eyes change when he touched the keys. Something inside her whispered that he was not ordinary at all. She leaned forward slightly, watching him with curiosity instead of judgment. The young man finally lowered his hands and pressed a single key, a soft, clear note that cut through the noise of the cafe. It was gentle, almost fragile, but the sound carried emotion. A few customers paused mid-conversation and looked over. Nobody expected that one small note to have such a pure tone. He pressed another note, and then another. Slowly, a melody began to form. It was simple at first, like a small wave touching the sand. But it had a strange power. The sound was not loud or dramatic, yet it made people turn their heads. The little boy tugged his mother's sleeve, whispering, "Mom is good." The young man continued, letting his fingers move freely. His hands remembered what his mind had forgotten. The melody became smoother, filled with emotion he had never spoken out loud. Each note carried a piece of his pain, his memories, his hopes. It felt like he was opening his heart in front of strangers. The cafe's atmosphere slowly shifted. The laughter stopped. The sarcastic smiles faded. People began to watch him without blinking. One woman who had mocked him earlier bit her lip, ashamed. The manager, who had expected a joke, stepped closer with surprise growing on his face. But the young man didn't notice anyone. He was lost in the music. For the first time in years, he felt alive. He played a tune he had created long ago, inspired by his mother's bedtime humming. The melody was soft but full of warmth, like a gentle hug on a cold night. Every key he pressed brought back a memory: her smile, her voice, her hands teaching him to stay strong at one moment. The music grew deeper, and he almost felt tears in his eyes. He blinked them away, not wanting to break the flow. His fingers moved faster, more confidently now, as if something inside him had woken up. The students who once laughed were suddenly silent. One of them whispered, "Bro, it's actually amazing." Another shook his head slowly and said, No. This is something else. A couple sitting near the counter began recording, not to mock him, but because they didn't want to forget this moment. The barista felt goosebumps on her arms. She had never heard anything so beautiful inside this small cafe as the melody grew stronger. The young man's entire posture changed. He looked like a different person, someone confident, someone meant for the stage. His music filled every corner of the cafe, reaching every ear, softening every heart. The people who had judged him now felt a strange mix of shock and guilt. No one had expected anything from him. They had only seen what he looked like, not who he truly was. But now they finally understood. They had laughed at a man who carried a whole world of music inside him. And he was only getting started. When the young man played the first gentle melody, the cafe slowly turned quiet. But no one knew that he had only begun. His fingers moved with more confidence now, tapping the keys with a mixture of fear, courage, and forgotten skill. Every note he pressed felt like reopening a door he had once closed forever. He was not just playing music, he was letting a buried part of himself rise again. The people in the cafe stared at him with growing surprise. They expected a simple tune, maybe a random mix of notes. But the melody that filled the cafe carried real emotion. It was soft at first, like morning light entering a dark room. Then it grew brighter and stronger, as if the music itself was taking a deep breath. The barista felt something strange, a warm shiver running through her arms. She had served many customers, seen many people play that old cafe piano, but no one had ever played it like this man. She leaned closer to the counter, forgetting her work completely. The coffee machine hummed behind her, but she didn't even hear it anymore. A man sitting near the door slowly lowered his newspaper, its expression frozen in shock. A teenage girl who had been scrolling through her phone paused mid-swipe. Even the group of students who had made fun of him earlier fell silent. Now their eyes were wide, filled with confusion and a little shame. But the young man did not see any of them. His eyes were half closed, his expression calm but emotional. His mind had gone somewhere else entirely. In his imagination, he was sitting in his mother's living room again, her warm smile watching over him. He could almost hear her telling him, "Don't rush, let the music breathe." He followed. Her advice even now, letting each note touch the air before moving to the next. Soon, the simple melody grew into something bigger. His fingers began to move faster, shaping a new rhythm, one that was deeper and more powerful. The piano responded to him like an old friend who had been waiting for this moment too. The keys vibrated gently under his touch, and the old wooden frame of the piano hummed softly. People in the cafe exchanged quiet whispers. "Is he a professional? Where did he learn to play like that? He doesn't look like someone who can do this." One older woman in the corner wiped a tear from her eyes. She whispered to herself, "This sounds like the music my husband used to play before he died." The melody reminded her of old memories filled with love and loss. She closed her eyes, letting the music pull her into a world she thought she had forgotten. A couple standing near the counter felt goosebumps. One of them whispered, "Whatever. This man has been through." You can hear it in his music. Outside the cafe, a few people walking by heard the melody through the glass windows. They stopped, confused, wondering how such beautiful music was coming from a small coffee shop. Some pressed their faces against the glass to see who was playing. Inside, the young man suddenly changed the tune again. His fingers danced faster, sharper, as if he was telling a story without words. The cafe lights reflected on his face, showing the deep lines of tiredness mixed with passion. His hair fell over his forehead as he leaned closer to the keys, playing with full heart. It felt as if the music was controlling him, not the other way around. He was no longer a poor man seeking a free cup of coffee. In that moment, he became a true musician, Someone born to create sound out of silence. But his hands were not just moving with talent, they were moving with memories. He remembered how life had pushed him away from music. He remembered the nights he cried alone after losing his mother. He remembered the humiliation of people treating him as if he was worthless. All of that pain flowed into the music, turning it into something deeper, richer, more powerful. Every customer felt it. They didn't know his story, but they could feel it inside the notes. The students who had mocked him earlier stared at him in awe. One whispered, "We were wrong. This guy is incredible." Another said, "I feel bad for laughing. Look at him. He's amazing." The cafe manager, who had allowed him to play only because he expected a joke, slowly walked closer. His face showed pure shock. He had never heard anyone play like this, not even the musicians who sometimes performed on weekends. The manager felt a sting of embarrassment in his chest. He suddenly realized he had judged the man too quickly. The young man continued, changing the melody again. Now the music sounded hopeful, like sunlight breaking through dark clouds. The cafe felt warmer. People's hearts softened. Even strangers found themselves connected by the sound filling the room. Finally, after a long moment, the music took a gentle turn again, becoming soft like a lullaby. The young man's fingers slowed down. The melody drifted like a soft whisper, leaving behind a trail of emotion in everyone who listened. And just like that, the cafe was no longer just a small shop with tables and chairs. It had become a place where hearts were touched, where strangers felt united, where a forgotten talent rose from silence, all because a hungry, tired young man had asked for a free cup of coffee and OFFERED the cafe something priceless in return. As the music flowed through the cafe, something strange happened. People stopped thinking. They stopped judging. They stopped speaking. They simply listened. The young man's fingers moved across the keys with such calm confidence that it felt almost unreal. The melody shifted again, turning warmer, softer, deeper. Like a story only he understood. The cafe was so quiet now that the only sounds were the piano and the gentle breaths of the listeners. Even the coffee machines, which usually hissed loudly, seemed to respect the moment and fell silent. Customers watched the man as if they were witnessing something rare, delicate, and precious. The manager, who once smirked at him, now stood frozen behind the counter. His arms were no longer crossed. Instead, they dropped to his sides as he stared at the musician in disbelief. He had judged the young man based on his worn clothes and tired face. But now, he saw something completely different. Someone extraordinary sitting at the old cafe piano, turning it into something magical. A young woman near the window covered her mouth with her hand as tears slipped down her cheeks. She wasn't crying because the music was sad. She was crying because it felt honest, raw, real. Like someone was speaking directly to her heart without using any words. She whispered to her friend, "I don't know who he is, but he's not normal. This is a gift." Meanwhile, the boy sitting with his mother looked amazed. He tugged her sleeve again and said, "Mom, he's like a music superhero." The mother smiled through watery eyes and nodded. "Yes, sweetheart, he is." As the young man played, he felt something shifting inside him too. Each note healed a small piece of him. He remembered nights when he played the piano for his mother, just to see her smile, even when she was sick. He remembered how she used to close her eyes and listen quietly. He remembered how she used to say, "Music is your home. When the world pushes you away, come back to it." But after she died, he had lost that home. He had walked away from music completely. He'd walked away from himself. And yet now, in this small cafe full of strangers, he was finding his home again. His fingers moved faster, playing a complicated sequence that made everyone lean closer. It was a mix of joy and sorrow, a melody that rose and fell like waves in a storm. The music felt alive. It felt like it had a soul. A customer whispered softly, "He's not playing. He's talking through the piano." Another answered, "He's telling us his story." Outside the cafe, more people were gathering near the window. They pressed their faces to the glass, trying to see the source of the beautiful sound. Some even opened the door a crack, letting the music escape into the street. A passing cyclist stopped, confused by the crowd, and peeked inside. The cafe manager woke from his shock and rushed to the door. For the first time ever, he welcomed the growing crowd with open arms. He didn't even think about business. He just said quietly, "Let them listen." Inside, the young man didn't notice the crowd at all. The music had taken over his mind. He wasn't playing to impress anyone. He wasn't playing for the free coffee anymore. He was playing because, for the first time in years, he felt alive. He felt seen. He felt understood by the instrument in front of him, friend he had abandoned but who still remembered him. The customers felt something special happening. Every note was hitting them differently. Some felt their old memories returning. Others felt comfort from pains they had never spoken about. A man in a business suit wiped his eyes secretly, afraid someone might notice his tears. A young girl recorded the entire performance with trembling hands, whispering, "This is history." "I know it." The music grew softer again. The young man played a gentle tune now. It was a melody he once created during one of the darkest nights of his life. A melody he promised himself he would never play again because it hurt too much. But today, playing it felt healing instead of painful. For a moment, the cafe felt like a sacred place. Everyone could feel it. No one dared to speak or move too much. They were afraid they would break the magic. Finally, after what felt like a long, beautiful dream, the young man lifted his fingers from the keys. The last note lingered in the air like a warm breath, soft and delicate. And then the cafe exploded. People clapped, shouted, cheered, cried. Some stood up, some covered their mouths, some held their hearts. The applause was so loud that it felt like the walls themselves were shaking. The young man looked up, confused and overwhelmed. He had expected silence, disappointment, maybe even laughter again. He never expected this. For a moment, he just sat there, unsure of what to do. He wasn't used to praise. He wasn't used to kindness. But as the applause continued, something inside him broke something heavy. Something painful, and for the first time in a very long time. He smiled. The applause in the cafe lasted much longer than the young man expected. It wasn't normal clapping. It wasn't polite clapping. It was the kind of applause people gave when they witnessed something unforgettable. Some customers even whistled, some stood up, and a few wiped their tears. The place that once laughed at him now celebrated him like a star. The young man sat frozen on the piano bench, unsure what to do. He had never heard applause like this before, not even in his childhood competitions. Back then, only his mother clapped the loudest, cheering for him with pure pride. Now, a room full of strangers was cheering in her place. The thought made his throat tight. A woman near the counter walked forward first. She placed her hand gently on his shoulder and said, "That was beautiful. I haven't felt something like that in years." Her voice cracked, as if the music had touched a part of her heart she kept hidden. Right after her, the barista stepped closer. She had tears in her eyes, though she tried to hide them behind her apron. "Sir, your coffee is free," she said softly. "Anything you want is free." She paused, then added with a trembling smile, "I've never heard such music in my life. Thank you for sharing it here." With us, the young man opened his mouth, but no words came out. He simply nodded, overwhelmed. The group of students who mocked him earlier slowly approached. Their faces were red from embarrassment. One of them, the tall boy who had laughed the loudest, cleared his throat awkwardly. "Hey man," he said quietly. "We're sorry." He rubbed the back of his neck. "We shouldn't have judged you. That was insane. Like, next level." Another student whispered, "You're a real musician. I'm sorry for laughing." Their voices carried genuine respect now. The young man didn't hold anger in his heart. He gave them a small, gentle smile. "It's okay," he said softly, and he meant it. Their laughter no longer mattered. The music had spoken for him. Meanwhile, a middle-aged man in a suit stepped forward. He looked important, expensive watch, polished shoes, sharp haircut. He extended a business card with both hands. "My name is Mr. Collins," he said. "I own a music studio downtown. If you ever want to record, call me. Your talent should not be hidden." The young man stared at the card as if it were a dream. Opportunities like this had disappeared from his life long ago. Now one was appearing out of nowhere. Inside a cafe he entered just because he was cold and hungry, before he could respond. Another voice spoke soft, shaky, full of emotion. An older woman from the back of the cafe approached him with slow steps. "Young man," she whispered, "the song you played. Did you compose it yourself?" He nodded gently. "Yes." She wiped a tear from her face. "My husband used to play a similar melody before he passed away. Listening to you felt like hearing him again." She placed her hand over her heart. "Thank you for giving me that moment. You reminded me of him." The young man felt his eyes water. He bowed his head slightly, humbled. He didn't know his music could heal people. He didn't know it could bring memories back to life. Soon, more customers surrounded him, some asking his name, some offering to buy him food, some simply wanting to shake his hand. It felt unreal. Moments ago, nobody cared about him. Moments ago, people laughed at him. Now they were treating him like someone important. But among all the voices, the cafe manager's voice rose above. He walked toward the young man with a guilty expression. For the first time that day, he looked human, not strict, just human. "I owe you an apology," he said softly, almost ashamed. "I judged you too quickly." T paused. "Thank you for giving us this moment. You reminded us that greatness doesn't always look like greatness." The young man nodded again. He wasn't angry. Life had taught him not to carry bitterness. Instead, he felt grateful that the world had allowed him one moment to shine again. But something else happens, something he didn't expect. One of the people near the door shouted, "Hey, there's a huge crowd outside." Everyone rushed to the windows. The young man followed slowly. When he looked outside, he gasped softly. More than 20 people were gathered, pressing their faces to the glass, trying to see him. Some were recording. Some were waiting to come in. All of them had heard the music from outside and wanted to know who was playing. Inside the cafe, a quiet whisper began spreading. "He's going viral. Someone uploaded the video already. It's blowing up online." The young man stood there, staring at the growing crowd. At the phones pointed at him, at the people cheering even from outside. He had come for a free cup of coffee. Instead, he had awakened something much bigger, and his life was about to change forever. The young man stood frozen as he stared. Through the cafe window, the crowd outside grew larger with every second. People who had been passing by stopped when they heard the music earlier. Now they were pushing closer, trying to get a glimpse of the mysterious pianist everyone inside was talking about. The cafe, once half empty, now felt too small to hold the sudden attention he had drawn. Inside, customers whispered excitedly, "He's famous already. Look outside. His video is blowing up." The young man looked confused. He had never gone viral. He didn't even have a proper phone. It broke months ago. He didn't understand how one small performance inside a cafe could cause such a reaction. His hands shook slightly, not from fear this time, but from disbelief. The barista rushed to him, holding her phone out. "Look," she said, breathless. On her screen, he saw himself playing the piano. The video had already reached thousands of views in minutes. Comments were flooding in. "Who is this man? Absolute genius. I'm crying. This is beautiful. Someone sign him now." His chest tightened. He wasn't used to praise. Most of his life, he felt invisible, unnoticed, forgotten. This moment felt unreal, like a dream he wasn't ready to believe yet. Meanwhile, the cafe manager quickly unlocked the door. The moment he opened it, the outside crowd rushed in gently. Not to cause chaos, but to get closer to the man whose music had touched them from the street. Some held their phones up, others simply watched him with awe. The young man felt overwhelmed. He stepped back slightly, unsure of how to handle the sudden attention. But then, something beautiful happened. A young girl, maybe 8 years old, stepped forward through the crowd. She held a small notebook to her chest. Her voice was soft when she spoke. "Mister, can you sign this for me?" she asked. "I want to learn piano like you." The young man stared at her, stunned. Him sign something? He wasn't used to being admired. He slowly took the notebook and wrote his name with shaky hands. The girl smiled so big it looked like her whole world had just changed. Her mother approached and whispered to him, "Thank you." She hasn't smiled like that since her father left. You gave her hope. The words stabbed gently into his heart. Hope, that was something he had been missing for a long time. Right after that, the older woman who said the music reminded her of her late husband came up again. She held a small envelope. "Please," she said softly, "take this. It's not much, but I want to support your journey." He tried to refuse, but she insisted. "Your music gave me something priceless today. Let me give something small in return." His eyes softened, and he accepted it with both hands. Gratitude filled him, warm and unexpected. But the surprises didn't end there. Mr. Collins, the music studio owner, stepped forward again, this time with more confidence. "Listen," he said, "I wasn't joking. Come to my studio. We'll record a full piece. I'll help you find work, performances, anything you need." He paused, then added, "The world deserves to hear you." The young man blinked rapidly, trying to process it all. Opportunities were falling into his lap like stars dropping from the sky. It felt unreal, too good to be true. But then the cafe manager approached, holding a small box. "This," he said, awkwardly, "is a gift." He opened it, revealing a brand new pair of shoes. "I noticed yours are worn out. I'm sorry for judging you. Please accept this." The young man felt tears sting his eyes. Acts of kindness surrounded him from every direction. People who mocked him earlier were now offering food, clothes, help, work, even friendship. But the most emotional moment came when the barista stepped forward again. She looked nervous, like she wanted to say something important. "Sir, do you know what your music did?" she said softly. "It changed the whole atmosphere today. People came in angry, stressed, tired. But your music healed everyone here. Even me." Her voice cracked. "I've been struggling with things I don't tell anyone. But listening to you play, it felt like someone finally understood." The young man swallowed hard. He didn't know how to respond. He never imagined his music could reach this deeply into people's hearts. He looked around the cafe. Every face was watching him with warmth, admiration, and respect. The room that once mocked him now felt like a family he never had. And deep inside, something awakened a spark he thought had died long ago. He realized something powerful. He was not just a man begging for a cup of coffee. He was someone who could touch hearts. He was someone with a gift. He was someone who mattered. For the first time in years, he began to believe in himself again. The cafe was overflowing with people, voices, emotions, and energy. But in the middle of all the noise, the young man felt strangely quiet inside. It was the same quiet he felt when he touched the piano, like the world had paused just for him. Everything happening around him felt unreal. People held up their phones. Strangers smiled at him like they knew him. Some whispered about him with excitement. Others simply stared at him, amazed. His heart trembled in his chest. He wasn't used to being seen. Most of his life, he moved like a shadow in a bright world. But now, the spotlight was on him, and it didn't feel scary. It felt warm. Inside the cafe, people talked about the viral video that captured his performance. What was once meant as a mockery clip had turned into something inspiring. Comments online were spreading like wildfire. "This man needs a stage. Don't judge someone by their clothes." I cried listening to him. Please find him and give him a real career. Someone refreshed their screen and gasped. It's almost at 500,000 views. The young man's knees felt weak. 500,000. It didn't feel real. He had never imagined his music could travel beyond a small room, let alone reach thousands of hearts across the internet. A man pushing through the crowd caught everyone's attention. He wore a nice coat and held a tablet. "Sir," he said, approaching the young man, "I'm from a local news channel. We saw your video online. Would you be willing to share your story? People want to know who you are." The young man blinked slowly. Him? On the news. He had never imagined such a thing. For a second, fear rose inside him. Fear of being judged, fear of attention, fear of telling people about his painful past. But then he remembered the faces around him. The smiles. The tears. The warmth. Maybe it was time. He nodded gently. The reporter smiled and stepped aside to set up a small recording kit. Lights, microphone, tripod. The cafe transformed into a tiny studio. People moved back, giving him space, but they didn't leave. They wanted to witness this moment too. The reporter sat in front of him and asked softly, "What's your name?" He hesitated. He hadn't spoken his full name in a long time. It felt dusty inside his mouth. But he forced himself to say it. "My name is Daniel," he whispered. The cafe listened. "And Daniel?" The reporter continued gently. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Daniel looked down at his hands. They were still trembling from the emotions of the day. "My mother taught me," he said. "She loved music. She believed I had a gift." "What happened?" The reporter asked softly, sensing the depth of pain in Daniel's voice. Daniel took a slow breath. His chest tightened. His memories felt heavy, but he pushed through the weight. "She got sick," he said quietly. "I had to leave music school. I started working to help her, but she didn't make it." The cafe fell silent again. Even the people outside pressed closer to the windows. "I stopped playing after she passed away," Daniel continued. "Everything felt empty. I thought music was gone from my life forever. And today?" The reporter asked. "What made you come in here and ask to play?" Daniel looked around the cafe. The faces watching him. The piano that brought him home. The people who felt his music the way he once felt his mother's. "I was cold," he admitted with a sad smile. "And hungry. I just wanted a cup of coffee. I didn't know anything like this would happen." The reporter smiled warmly. "Your story will inspire many people, Daniel." When the recording ended, people applauded again, softer this time. As if respecting the pain behind his journey, the cafe felt like a sanctuary, now safe, warm, filled with love. People took turns thanking him again, shaking his hand, offering small gifts. Some brought snacks. Others slipped folded notes with encouraging words into his pockets. A few asked if he would come back another day to play again. Daniel's heart felt full for the first time in years. Finally, the barista approached with a warm cup of coffee, steam rising from it. "Sir, you never got your drink," she said with a shy smile. "It's extra sweet. I thought you could use something warm." Daniel accepted it with both hands. The warmth spread through his fingers and into his chest. "Thank you," he said softly, "for everything." He looked at the piano again. It had dust on it when he arrived. Now, it felt like a polished mirror, reflecting his new beginning. He touched the edge of it gently. He had come looking for warmth. But instead, he found purpose. People started chanting softly from behind him, as if encouraging him. "Play one more. Please. Just one more song." Daniel looked at the crowd, at the piano, at the moment, and then he whispered to himself, "For Mom." He sat back down, placed his fingers on the keys, and prepared to give the cafe something even more powerful than before. Daniel sat before the piano again, but this time, everything felt different. When he first touched it earlier, he was just a cold, hungry man searching for a warm drink. Now, he sat like someone reborn, someone lifted from the shadows and placed into the light. The cafe became silent once more, as if the world itself was holding its breath for him. He rested his fingers gently on the keys. The people around him waited quietly, their eyes filled with hope and excitement. Even the children stood still, holding their breath. Outside, the crowd pressed closer, faces against the glass, phones raised, eyes wide. It was no longer just a cafe. It had become a small concert hall, glowing with anticipation. Daniel closed his eyes. In his mind, he saw his mother. She was sitting beside him like she used to, smiling softly, her hand resting on his shoulder. He imagined her whispering, "Play, Daniel. Let the world hear you." So he began. The first note he played was soft, like a gentle whisper. Then another note, slightly stronger. The melody started slow, delicate, like falling snowflakes touching the ground. Every sound floated through the cafe, like warm air in winter. The crowd leaned in closer, caught in the beauty of the moment. Daniel poured his heart into the keys. He played the piece he wrote the night before his mother died, a piece he had never shared with anyone. It was full of sadness, love, longing, and hope. It carried every feeling he had locked inside himself for years. The cafe felt it. Some people began to cry quietly. Others placed their hands over their hearts. The manager removed his glasses and wiped his eyes, ashamed that he had misjudged Daniel earlier. The barista leaned forward on the counter, unable to stop her tears. Even the people outside, who could barely hear the music, felt the emotion in his movements. Daniel kept playing. The melody rose slowly, like dawn light breaking over a dark horizon. Then it grew stronger, like a bird finally opening its wings after being trapped for years. His fingers moved faster, dancing across the keys, each note hitting with passion and strength. He wasn't just playing music. He was telling his story. He was freeing himself. Memories flashed through his mind as he played his childhood piano lessons. His mother's warm hands, the day he got accepted into the music academy. The night he left because he couldn't afford it. And the empty years when he thought his dreams were dead. And then the moment he walked into this cafe, tired and broken, asking only for a cup of coffee. He played all of it. The crowd felt everything. People who didn't know him felt like they suddenly did. The music wrapped around every listener like a warm blanket, comforting them, healing them, reminding them of their own lost dreams and hidden pain. Suddenly, the melody changed again. It became brighter, happier, more alive. Daniel's fingers lifted the music into the air like fireworks bursting across the sky. The cafe windows shook softly with the power of his final notes. And then he ended with a soft, gentle chorda, goodbye, a thank you, a promise. The cafe exploded. Cheers roared through the room. People clapped until their hands hurt. Some shouted his name. The crowd outside cheered too, even if they didn't hear the last notes. They felt the energy, the magic, the raw emotion. Daniel stood slowly, overwhelmed. The applause hit him like a warm wave. Tears filled his eyes. He had spent years believing he was nothing. But now, every face looking at him was filled with admiration. Daniel, Daniel. The crowd chanted he had never heard his name shouted like that. The reporter rushed back to him. Daniel, he said, smiling widely, you're going to be on tonight's news. The whole city will know your name. Mr. Collins, the studio owner, grabbed Daniel's hand. We start recording tomorrow, he said firmly. Your life is about to change. The barista stepped forward with the warmest smile he had ever seen. You found your place today, she whispered. Don't let it go again. The crowd started chanting again, softer this time, filled with love. Play again. Don't stop. You're amazing. Daniel laughed through tears. For the first time in many years, he felt light. He felt free. He felt alive. He looked at the piano one last time and whispered, "Thank you." Because that piano had given him more than a free cup of coffee. It gave him back his dream, his purpose, his future. And as Daniel stepped away from the piano, surrounded by people who believed in him, he realized something beautiful. Sometimes one small moment, one small chance can change everything. And this cafe, this day, this performance had changed his life forever.